What's happening, folks? Back with another reaction, back with some more J-drama score. We're back with a tune from a really excellent show, but which also will feature a sort of sad anecdote. We're going to listen to a piece from the score from Miss Sherlock. This is a Japanese show that came out 2018. And unlike a lot of shows I talk about, it's funny, this show was released by the same Malaysian company, DVD version. I know, it's such a generic name. But they release Japanese and I think also Chinese shows, but I just sort of focus on the Japanese shows. But they release them internationally, worldwide, and they have several different types of subtitles, including English subtitles. So I got this show through my normal means of finding Japanese shows and buying them off of a handful of sellers that I know on eBay and to a lesser extent Amazon, because they tend to be more expensive on Amazon. So I got it through my normal means. But I then found out that this was on, I think it was HBO. And not only was it on HBO, but you could access it through Netflix. So this was a more internationally distributed and available Japanese drama than a lot of the ones that I watch. So I feel like there's a higher percentage chance that maybe some people out there have seen Miss Sherlock, which it's a modern take on Sherlock. It takes place in the 21st century in Japan. As you can see, both Sherlock here, Takachi Yuko, the actress playing her, more on that in a minute, and then also what's her name? Kanjia Shihori, or Shihori. Yeah, she plays Watson or Watto, and Watto is, a reasonably common name in Japan, a surname, and so, Watson becomes Watto. But yeah, it's a stylized take and a sort of, flip the nature of Sherlock and Watson, which, different versions, there's so many different versions of Sherlock, and, we've had modern versions before, there have been other versions where at least one of the characters is a female, so it's been done in different ways. But I really enjoy this version, and the Sherlock here is it's like kind of the Cumberbatch interpretation in that it's, she's a bit jaded toward, other humans and just regular people, and in some cases seems to maybe not have her morals aligned in the way that you'd like, but she is very smart and she really does care and she wants to get things done. The Watson in this show is a bit more naive, a bit kind of like in I think Nigel Bruce, famously, she's not silly in the way that Nigel Bruce's Watson was sort of silly, but she's less on it in some moments than, say, the Martin Freeman Watson, or the Jude Law Watson even. But yeah, bottom line, she plays the part very interestingly as well. They're both really, really good, and the Mrs. Hudson analog is fantastic. Bottom line, all the characters are played very well. It's a very compelling drama. The season that plays out, it has a proper ending and it works. There's, a couple moments in the last couple episodes where I wish they would have just done it slightly differently. So I like the overall contours of the way the show plays out. Even if I would nitpick maybe one or two ways that they finished it in the last couple episodes, but they clearly kind of set it up for a season 2, and the last moment of the show now has this sort of meta tragic sort of baggage to it, which is to say the lead actress, Takochi Yuko, she did one show after this and then she committed suicide. Now unfortunately, that's in not just Japan, but in a lot of places, entertainers, especially female entertainers, are under a lot of pressure and stress, and some of them are struggling to get by, not getting the roles, and not treated the best on the set and so on. So this isn't something that was unprecedented in Japan, but it actually caused a real shock in Japan because of unlike some of the other performers who had been found to have committed suicide, she was very much very successful, had never really had a phase where she wasn't acting in things, was very well critically received in her performances. She had a family, so bottom line, it was a little shocking in the context of Japanese, entertainment culture, because people were whoa, from the outside she looked like she had everything, which of course that does not mean that there's not turmoil on the inside. So bottom line, it just, it's another anecdote which reminds me just to try to get people in your life, if they need help, let them know you're there. Let them know that if if they want to talk, you're there for it. Obviously you don't impose yourself, but at the end of the day, it's another thing that mental health is a real struggle, even for people who, by your own comparison, you feel like, oh, they must be doing great. They must be so happy with the way they're doing. That might not be the case. And in fact, because maybe everybody thinks that way about a certain person, maybe they feel like they have no one to talk to because everyone just assumes that they're doing great. So, in light of that anecdote, just shout out to all the mental health professionals, and don't hesitate if you or someone else in your life needs help and needs to talk to someone. Regardless of that, we're going to listen to the final piece of music at the end of episode 7, which is to say, there's good score throughout the film, but then at the end of each episode, there's a different piece of music that accompanies the end credits, which is different. Like a lot of Japanese shows, it's the same piece of music every time you get to the end credits. This is different, and it's a different piece each time, and it tends to characterize or encapsulate the feeling that you have as a viewer at the end of that episode. Well, the end of episode 7, I won't spoil too much if you want to go through and watch the show, but Watson has been manipulated to think that Sherlock is a very bad person. Sherlock had to commit violence against someone that Watson or Watto cared about deeply, because he was actually a bad person who wanted to commit an act of public terrorism. But Watto doesn't really understand that, and she's manipulated by the character that is essentially the Moriarty analog, to not trust Sherlock. And Sherlock, right by the end of this episode, realizes the trick, and that Watson's been tricked, and that Sherlock has been sort of framed for not framed, but that her necessary and moral action is being cast as a crime. So she actually has to go underground. She's on the run. So when this episode ends, Sherlock, reeling from this sort of newly sprung trap by Moriarty, is trying to get in touch with Watto to prevent her from being manipulated and tricked by the Moriarty character, but it's too late. It's already happened, and she turned off her phone. She doesn't want to talk to Sherlock. And Sherlock, who's doesn't get very emotional the whole show, she's trembling and on the verge of crying hysterically, because she knows how greatly Moriarty has played everything and tricked Watto. So in this moment, she's broken. It's oh my God, the worst thing have happened. Not only am I on the run and people think I'm a criminal, but the one person I care about and actually consider a friend thinks I'm a traitor and a murderer. So obviously there's still this sense that she's gonna, stay underground and try to expose what really happened and eventually get Watson back on her side. So there's this remaining sliver of hope, but it's in a really sad place. And I wanted to give a shout out to Tassos. I talked to him about lots of different types of music, and I just played him this tune with no context yesterday. And he was like, man, that's incredible. It's soul crushing, but with a little tiny bit of hope. And I was like, oh my God, bro, you don't even know. You totally just hit the vibe of what they're doing in this part of the show. So again, it's a testament to his perception, but also to the appropriate nature of the sonic quality of this piece. So here we go. This is the episode 7 end credit music to the Miss Sherlock show, which is from 2008. And the music composer and director for the show is Suehiro Kenichiro. Yeah, Suehiro Kenichiro. So here we go. Episode 7, end credit music, Miss Sherlock, 2018. So obviously a very short piece, but I can't tell you, like, it's one of the reasons I enjoy talking about these J-dramas. Not only do I think they're just great shows, well acted, well written, but the music is just really a consistent positive with so many of the J-dramas that I've seen. And oftentimes the sonic quality really does capture the atmosphere of the narrative that's happening in that moment, or in this case, just before we hear this, which is actually, it makes you focus on the music more, because now we just had this crazy narrative development, boom, the visuals end, and we just hear this, obviously with rolling credits, but the point is, like, you get to think about the tune more in terms of atmosphere and how the sonics relate to the narrative, because you're not like focused or reading subtitles of dialogue. So yeah, in this case, it happens right after a very significant narrative development, but that actually like plays to the advantage of the piece, I think. Regardless, yeah, it's very austere. It feels like you're kind of like floating, but like maybe there's, you're floating in a direction you don't want to go. And again, it feels sad, melancholic, but maybe there's just this sense that, it's not necessarily the end of the story. But yeah, I think the word sublime was sort of invented for pieces like that. Just very touching, very tender, very light, but again, like a worry, a sort of a sense that, things are not as they should be, but maybe that's not the end of the story. Maybe that can still be rectified. So yeah, once again, shout out to, Suehiro Kenichiro. Yeah, Suehiro Kenichiro. As I said, the show is great, and I forgot to mention the sort of meta tragedy of the last part of the last episode. It seems close to the end of the show that Sherlock actually dies. Like, and again, if you watch Sherlock shows, you know that one of the famous things in Arthur Conan Doyle's novels is that it appears like he dies along with Moriarty, and then he comes back later. So like, you're hoping that she's not dead, but it feels like she might genuinely be dead. And then the very last shot, Wato's kind of broken and she's like sad, like kind of sitting on the ground. And, the whole show, for the most part, Sherlock keeps wearing the same outfit, it becomes kind of a running joke. And then in the last shot, again, you're kind of looking at Watto, who's hunched over, and you see walking into the shot the pants and like bottom of the coat that Sherlock always wears. Now, you don't see her proper, but she walks back in, and that's the very final shot of the show. So it seems they were maybe setting up a season 2, or at least implying that she survived. But again, now it has this crazy thing, because like, she is dead, and so like she didn't come back, and they're not going to do a season 2. And like, so basically when I rewatched the show and I got to the end of the last episode, I was like, oh my god, it's like, yeah, I mentioned before, Dead Poet Society, Robin Williams at the end, he's like crying about a character that committed suicide, and then later in his life he himself committed suicide, and so like that scene is almost like unwatchable. It's just so tragic. So yeah, bottom line, let me know what you think of this piece. Check out Miss Sherlock if you haven't seen it. Other than that, I will see you next time. Peace.